let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you everyone for joining. Really excited about our conversation here with Alex Shockley from a very cool company called Journey. Alex, welcome, man. Thanks for carving out some time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Indeed. We're excited about your solution because it's really purpose-built to solve one of the most annoying things that all of us as consumers deal with every single day when we call in for support with somebody, right? Where they want to ask us 17 questions on how to validate our identity. And you guys have a very unique approach to solving that problem. Why don't we just start there real quick? Give us a little bit of color, if you could, on Journey. You're the creator of this really cool tech. I'd love to get kind of the background of what inspires you to solve for this particular problem.
Sure. Yeah, happy to jump in. So my background prior to Journey most recently was founding and selling a digital marketing company. So it's been the last couple of years before this really focused on sort of conversion optimization and UI, UX sort of topics. And actually co-founded the company with my dad, named many in the contact center space, maybe familiar with Brett Shockley. He ran the contact center business unit at Cisco. He was CTO at Avaya. He started Spamlink and Calabrio. And so we talked for a long time about sort of the world of innovation and the pace of innovation on the digital ad tech and MarTech stack, all the things that you can do to influence customer journey and gather insights from what's taking place as people engage through digital domains. But then as soon as somebody picks up that phone and calls you, we're now losing access to all of those tool sets and largely restricting that engagement to being audio only. So asking and answering questions over the audio channel. And so these phones obviously can do a heck of a lot more than just drive a speaker and a microphone. And so we sort of came together to look at how do we leverage everything that's happening on the digital side and bring that into better influence, make a more efficient interaction between the customer and the business. And of course, the most ubiquitous part of any phone call is answering the most fundamental question of who is this? Yeah. And if you're limited to asking, what's your mother's maiden name? What's your favorite pizza topping? Key in your 16-digit account number. There's both a lot of room for error on the user side, as well as it's not the most difficult thing in the world these days for fraudsters to get a hold of a lot of those basic questions. So the whole point of Journey is coming together to look at what else can we do? What other tools can we bring into this conversation so that we can rethink what's possible from a security, from a customer experience, and from a data privacy perspective.
Yeah, I get it. Alex, you talk a lot about this idea of zero knowledge. And when I call into a support center and they're asking me those questions, right? You've got some great ones, by the way, of like really kind of bizarre off the wall ones that people are asking now as well. But that is based, that's easy for me to answer as a consumer because that's what I know, right? I know my social security, I know my mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on, whatever those might be. But to your point, it's easy for hackers to, for the bad guys to also know exactly that same data. Right. Talk about the future of kind of ID authentication and why zero knowledge is such a critical component of that.
Yeah, so just to give a little backstory on what zero knowledge means, where that comes from, it's a term in cryptography. You'll commonly hear ZK snark or zero knowledge proof, and it's a mathematical process that gains some popularity in certain circles, at least during kind of the crypto craze of the last 5 years. And it's essentially a mathematical process of proving something is true without revealing the evidence. And so a common sort of use case example of that would be the ability to prove to a bartender that you're over the age of 21 without revealing your birth date. And when we think about the nature of questions that are asked from an agent in the contact center, whether it's for your credit card number, it's your PIN number, there are very few circumstances where the agent actually needs to know that input. What they're actually looking for is sort of the operational output from that, the pass, fail, or above or below a certain threshold sort of operational output. And that's the same sort of thing, sort of philosophically, I think applies when you look at the value of even a Facebook or different sort of ad tech platforms, where it's they've got all this information about us and makes us really creeped out by. And the reality is it's not the raw data that actually has intrinsic value. It's the operational insights that they can sort of glean from that and then provide some sort of monetizable service from. And so when I look at the future of the broader identity space and how people authenticate or prove their identity credentials with different services, We like to kind of take that sort of puristic view of enabling businesses to act on that operational insight without needing to see the raw evidence going into it. So make it a lot easier for the business to ask you to perform some task, for example, on a device that you own, where the output from that device then is the pass fail in a way that they are confident acting on it, rather than treating that business or that agent as the intermediary that needs to see or hear your sensitive information and then make a decision from it.
Yeah, that's the simplicity of that is a bit of a no-brainer. It's like it makes you wonder, why aren't we doing this all the time, right? Why are so many companies so behind the curve on this? Give us an example of kind of the workflow of this, right? Where does it come into play? And I know that it can happen in a variety of different ways. Give us kind of the most common use case of where Journey is integrated into a contact center's workflow from a consumer's perspective. What's the experience that I have?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And you typically, when you look at sort of that customer life cycle from I'm going to become a customer and I need to onboard and do some sort of identity verification to enroll, to I'm calling in the future and I need to authenticate in some capacity. Now I'm authenticated and I want to perform some sort of interaction or transaction. Typically, you see those different sequences being addressed by a different variety of applications, because it's natural to say, what does identity proofing have to do with signing a terms and conditions document? Those are unrelated actions. But when you look through the lens of the customer, the way you interact with the business should be consistent. You don't want to have these disjointed interactions. And so Journey's approach is not to come in as a new application for solving authentication, for example. It's rather coming in to say, how do you bring in your own digital channel so that you can now collect inputs from a smart device and perform a broad set of interactions locally on that device? And so that allows us, when we're focused on sort of standardizing that architectural request for an input from a device, it doesn't matter to us as much what that input is. And it allows us to come in at any point or at all points of that customer journey. So from a Banking Secrecy Act compliant identity verification sequence, embedded in the business's own mobile app or mobile website, to multi-factor biometrics, whether it's Face ID or Touch ID, or it's bringing in behavioral or some other engine, to now signing documents, processing payments, et cetera. Our intent is not to solve for one individual point in that journey, but rather to help the business have a blended voice and digital experience where you can now take advantage of whatever the smart device can support wherever that's needed throughout that journey.
Got it. So I'm a consumer, I'm calling into my bank, right?
Sure.
And let's say I'm an existing customer. How are they going to leverage Journey from the agent perspective, right? How are they pushing me through that authentication experience? How does it actually work?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the typical experience might be you call in and Journey's integration at the contact center sees that incoming Annie, and we're able to determine a variety of factors about that phone number. Does it match an existing account? Does that account have the mobile app downloaded? Is this call coming from a smartphone? What are the available methods of authentication for this account? What are the preferred methods of authentication for this account? Are they calling the international wire transfer line, or is it the local branch? And factor some different pieces in to determine what is the best method of authentication available here. And so in a traditional world, that may be enter your 16-digit account number, followed by your PIN number, then answer security questions about your mother's maiden name. That can take, on average, 45 to 90 seconds. With Journey, if you call in and you're an existing customer, we can have the IVR send you a push notification saying, for the fastest, most secure experience, please log into your mobile app. You tap the notification, spins Face ID, and you're in. So we've reduced it from that 20 to 30 taps to get your account number and your date of birth and your PIN number down to that single tap. And then the authentication factor is biometric rather than knowledge-based. Then once you're connected with the agent, if they need you to agree to terms and conditions, for example, rather than reading a script out loud to you, they can push that to your mobile app, collect a finger signature, maybe enter your social or whatever you need to do. And the agent sees the pass fail that's been completed. It's the documents delivered to the CRM or wherever it's required. And so you can continue on with the call there.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. And that's really powerful. You've also then bridged this into another very secure transaction, of course, which is payments. Same thing applies, right? How many times have I given my full credit card number the code on the back, the billing zip code, all this information to a human over the phone. And where's that human sitting? Who is that person I'm talking to? I don't think any of us have ever been comfortable with doing that, but it's always been our reality, right? And when it comes to things like PCI compliance, anybody that is taking payments has to be thinking about the details around PCI compliance and the risks around that if you're not compliant. You guys are taking payments out of scope for PCI with so many different customers now. Talk about the importance of that.
So there's a fundamental truth with any knowledge-based action over a phone call, and payments is a great example of it. If I'm able to call in or talk to an agent and process a payment by telling them my details, I've proven two things to be true. I've proven that knowledge of my credit card number is sufficient to make a transaction, and I've proven that this person I'm talking to now shares that knowledge. So it's self-defeating in a very obvious way from a security perspective.
Yes.
And so in a traditional world, we've put those agents in a controlled environment where we have clean desk policies so they can't write things down, and we cross our fingers they don't have a good enough memory to take advantage of that. But in today's environment, you've got well over 50% of agents around the world are working from their kitchen tables. And so all those security practices go out the window. And back to what I was saying before about kind of the operational output versus the raw input, no agent should care what your number is. They should only care that you were able to process that payment successfully, that transaction was completed. And so rather than treating that agent or the contact center stack at large as the intermediary, so whether you're telling it to the agent or you're using a secure IVR, what our approach does is effectively establish a private session on the user's smartphone or web browser or a mobile app, where we're essentially bringing the payment gateway to that unique session. So the customer is able to enter their details. They can now pay through a variety of methods, Apple Pay, PayPal, et cetera. And the agent can see the pass-fail associated with that. The caller then also has the option for signing documents, authenticating as part of it, doing whatever else needs to be done in a more richer, more complete interaction. But you've taken the agent and the contact center out of the sort of the supply chain of that information. And so the scope of PCI compliance only pertains to the people and systems that have access to the data. So if you remove them from the supply chain, you're outside of that scope. Wow. And that is such a huge thing for so many companies. To maintain PCI compliance is not a cheap thing. The budget compliant or the budget implications of this problem can be significant. I think you've got a slide, just a single slide that kind of illustrates that. Share that with us real quick if you could, Alex. Sure. There you go. Always hard to condense things into a single slide here, but this just sort of touches on a few of the different interactions here. As I mentioned, an example of the caller calling into the bank and getting the push notification to authenticate. That's sort of that screen on the left there. Once somebody does log into the business's own mobile app or mobile browser, which is where we tend to embed, it gives you the opportunity to also reveal some information about the agent that you're speaking with. So in this middle screen here, you can see a caller can see now that they're connected with Mary S. We can see her photo, we can see her ID number and star rating. So it's more of an Uber sort of experience as opposed to just a yellow taxi cab sort of thing. And then now you've got this place for any interactions or transactions that need to take place, whether it's scanning a driver's license, processing a payment, et cetera. You've now got this sort of overlay to the mobile app or the mobile browser where the business can, again, request just about anything that the device can conceivably provide. So whether it's biometric authentication, it's a broader identity verification for opening a Banking Secrecy Act compliant financial account, it's signing forms, taking payments, et cetera. And essentially, these are all API calls from the business. So these can be generated programmatically from an IVR, IVA, chatbot, or from the agent sending these requests. So it also expands what's possible from an IVR containment perspective. Yeah, got it. Interesting. So in this example, I know another use case, you talked a little bit about onboarding of a new client, right? If I'm a new customer of a credit union and I'm trying to establish an account, and the way we've always done that, or I'm filling out loan paperwork, or I'm in the middle of refinancing a mortgage or whatever.
Talk about how identity plays into that workflow, because you're able again to validate everything, exactly who I am, including all the way down to looking at scanned images of passports or driver's license. Talk about some use cases around onboarding of a new customer.
Yeah, so the Banking Secrecy Act, Anti-Money Laundering, Know Your Customer Identification Protocol. That's the BSA, AML, KYC, CIP as the regulatory standard. Yeah, it's a mouthful. If you Google it, you find the PDF that outlines that it's more plain text than you would expect, but it basically puts the onus on the financial institution to collect and verify name, date of birth, address, and social as the 4 key pieces of information, and then get to a reasonable degree of confidence that the person that's submitting information is the owner of the information. And of course, they leave it very vague as to what you actually need to do there. They don't bless any process, but they'll tell you if you run afoul of something after you've had fraud event. And so typically what you see done when businesses want to enable sort of a remote interaction where they can't look at you and look at the license and stamp and say, yeah, that smells right. If they're going to do it remotely, you're starting from scratch. You don't have any shared knowledge about this person. And so historically, we've generally then looked to what's known as dynamic KBA, knowledge-based authentication, where you're tapping the credit bureaus. And that's where we're all accustomed to seeing those lists of questions of what address are you, did you live at in the 90s, things like that. I had one at a credit union a couple months ago when I got a car loan. It's a true story, where I had a multiple choice question on my zodiac sign. And so not only does the fraudster have a 1 in 4 chance of guessing that correctly, I didn't know my zodiac sign because that's not something I'm particularly interested in. So I had to go look at my own question. And that's been the state of the art, since remote onboarding or account openings that have been available, because there haven't been other tool sets at their disposal. But the reality is when we move past that audio channel again to tap into what these devices can support, these things have a heck of a lot more power than even a trained agent can have to do matching from a facial enrollment and then scanning a driver's license or passport, for example. We can now match my face to my photo ID with about a 1 in a million false acceptance rate, and then verify the legitimacy of a driver's license or a document or a passport with similar confidence. And that process is statistically greater than any trained person in a branch can do. And so the opportunity is there in front of us to take this convoluted sequence that nobody thinks is secure. There are just people that are fooling themselves and thinking that's the only option. And now we can bring this into the 21st century in a way that is dramatically easier for the customer and dramatically more secure for the business.
That's so powerful. Alex, personal note, I've been married 33 years, and about a year ago, my wife and I realized that we didn't know each other's zodiac signs. and then I turned to her and said, well, gosh, I hope we're compatible. Right. So, yeah, that's a funny one. That's great. Hey, there's another use case that's really interesting to me, and it has to do with remote work. So many of our customers now have pushed their contact center agents out to work from home. And whether it's their own people or it's through outsourced, BPOs. And it's in a really interesting phenomena has happened in the world of outsourced work and people working from home. And it's really simple. How do I know that the guy that I've hired and trained that is now jumping onto a phone queue at 9 o'clock on Monday morning is actually the same guy that I hired and trained? Talk about how you guys are now turning the tables on that and leveraging Journey to validate that my employees are who they say they are.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, particularly when you look at the world of BPOs, the outsourced contact centers, where the number of employees number in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of some of these businesses, and that sector is plagued with notoriously high turnover rates. You can be interviewing and hiring tens to hundreds of thousands of people per year. And so this becomes a machine to turn here. It's not the same thing as your local business where somebody's coming in, them on a first name basis. And particularly again with COVID and the shift to people working from home and working remotely, there's a lot of challenges, be it again the sort of the inability to have a clean desk, and now there's a greater opportunity for fraudsters to get involved in the game and ship information out the back door, as well as people taking advantage of it, as you mentioned, professional interviewer who's then outsourcing the work to others, and a number of other attack vectors in that space. And so what Journey's doing is using, again, if we kind of bring it to the outermost ring of what we're providing, and that's the kind of standard architecture for requesting an input from a smart device, that allows us to turn all these same technologies around to work with sort of applicants to handle identity verification. And we can integrate with video tools like Zoom to prohibit somebody from joining a meeting without first matching themselves to a passport, for example, and verifying the passport. And then that same biometric enrollment of their face that we would use to match them to the photo ID, we can then leverage as a password replacement into the SSO solution. So that's another big one when you've got thousands or tens of thousands of employees. If you're enforcing some weekly or monthly password rotation, we hear quoted all the time that 10 to 15% of agents do a weekly password reset. And Gartner and Forrester will put that number in the kind of $40 to $75 per password reset range when you factor in the missed time from work, the IT support, the backfilling of employees to support that time, et cetera. So replacing that knowledge-based credential with a biometric credential is obviously more secure, as well as saves that cost. And then ultimately what we do past that is we can leave the webcam on to continually reconfirm that the right person is present at their screen. So we're refreshing the time to live of that SSO token, essentially, while also dynamically looking if there's a second face looking over the shoulder or change of location or some other anomalous event. So it's a whole suite of solutions there to solve for both the efficiency as well as the security around who's showing up for work.
Wow, that could have a massive financial implication on a business. The ROI on that use case alone could pay for the whole thing and more. So much of the pressure right now on CX leaders and customers that we work with is this idea that I've got to now more than ever do more with less, right? There's massive emphasis on cutting expense out of the business, but I still need to create and deliver on great customer experiences and still grow revenues and all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating to think about how an authentication solution like yours can actually have an impact on driving cost out of the business. The use case you just mentioned is a great example, but these others have very real material effects on budget. Speak to that for just a moment. What have you seen as kind of possible returns on investment for some of your clients?
I think you guys at CX Effect do a great job talking about sort of the CX paradox, as you put it, the need to do more with less, the need to automate as well as to personalize. In all these different angles here, and certainly we're seeing that as well. And I think there's pretty consistent budgetary constraint pressures across industries right now. And back to the very start of our conversation here about why and how did we start Journey? The starting point, it can very simply be described as the state of the art today is a voice conversation, and this device is capable of supporting a heck of a lot more than a voice conversation. So when we're limited to asking and answering questions, there's only so many things we can do to move the needle on automation, on self-service, on IVR containment, on security, on customer experience. And there's a ton of innovation happening on what you can do in that voice channel, but you've got a very firm brick ceiling over your head on what tools are at your disposal. Right. And so our position is really to come in and say, whether it's in chat, whether it's in the IVR, IVA space, whether it's when you engage with the agent, let's maximize the tools in your toolkit so you can radically rethink what's possible. And so from an authentication is a perfect example of that, where if today you're limited to doing some account lookup information using the dial pad, and then the agent asks you security questions, well, we all know that takes a long time, costs a lot of money, and doesn't have great security or customer experience.
Yes.
If we can shift that to Face ID, and then we in the background can check a SIM swap database to make sure your phone hasn't been tampered with, well, we have a much stronger proof of identity, and that took place purely within the IVR. And we're eliminating the handle time associated with authentication. So it's all about expanding the tools in your toolkit so that you can perform more and literally do more with less.
That's awesome. I was about to ask you, Alex, if you had any closing comments. I don't know if you can beat what you just said. That's pretty compelling. Maybe give it a shot. Is there any? I mean, we got 1 minute left here. Anything else you want to leave with our attendees?
No, I appreciate the conversation so far. I would say it's to piggyback, I guess, on the last comment there. The one angle is the expanding the tools in your toolkit so you can tap into your own digital environments there. Yeah. And the second, again, is back to rethinking what is that flow of data. And so when you can unlock your own digital channel, and you can do it using our zero knowledge network, you're able to categorically take your contact center out of that flow of information, so you can request more information and you can protect more information at the same time.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. Alex, thank you so much. And to our attendees, thanks for jumping in. What a fascinating space to think about as you consider how you radically change and improve your customer experience, and how identity can be right at the core of that. Guys, we're huge fans of Journey. You want to learn more, drop us a line here at CX Effect. We'd love to dig in and help you figure out how you can attack customer experience from an identity perspective. Zero knowledge, man. Who knew zero knowledge was such an important thing? That's awesome. I love it. Alex, great job. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.